Good morning, Livingston Church, and it's really good to be here, and it's really good to be here in person and seeing you guys in person. It's just a privilege to be invited by the youth team this morning to be with you and to share with you a question that I'm constantly trying to find an appropriate way in which to respond. And so the question is about who I am. And who I am is often decided on about my reality around me. And so the question is am I good enough? And am I enough? And so this question comes to me in lots of different ways. And so I might go, just make sure this is on. So I go, am I not tall enough? Am I not smart enough? I'm not quick enough. I'm not sharp enough. I am not a great rememberer. I am all these really good things that come to my mind and they go, man, I am not. Now, these things can come in many different ways. It could be something on Facebook that comes through and I see somebody else's holiday and I go, man, my holidays are not good enough. They're awful holidays. I see their pictures and they're glamorous pictures and I go, man, you know what? I'm not sharp enough. I don't look good enough. Not enough. And I ask myself, what is the response that I'm supposed to have for that question when I'm feeling I am not enough? I am not good enough. How am I supposed to respond to this? So, it came up a couple of weeks ago, right? So, I sort of take on about 70% of the load in washing, right? So, I empty the clothes washer and I organise it, right? So, I get all the heavy stuff out first, and then I get the lighter stuff, t-shirts, and then at the end I stack all the undies and all that stuff, and then the socks. I get all the pairs and I crisscross them, get them all organised. So when I go out, I'm ready to go. It's all organised. I don't have to sort through it all, trying to find that odd pair of socks. I'm ready to go, and I'm about, and for me, I put the sheets on, and they go at the back of the line, and mine's attached to the wall. And so Michelle comes out, and she says, I'll give you a hand. And then she says, I like to put the sheets out first out front. And then I get this wave of you're not good enough. The way you hang up washing isn't good enough. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Why am I feeling this is washing? This isn't brain surgery, no one's gonna die. This is washing. I'm going, man, I'm starting to feel this emotion well up in me, and it's starting to go into my blood, into every part of my body. You're not good enough. Oh, wow. And so I've really been thinking really hard over the last couple of weeks, how do I respond to that? What is my response when I start to get this feeling of, man, you're not good enough? And so let me just check something out with you, all right? Okay, so who here has ever felt hey, you're not good enough? Just pop your hand up. Okay, all right, we've got some brave people here. All right, so I'm not good enough. Now, let me ask you another question, all right? And the question here is, who believes that they are unconditionally loved by Jesus Christ? All right, so we've got a similar amount of hands go up. This is messed up, else. Like, think about it. On one hand, we are good enough just how we are right now. I'm good enough to be loved unconditionally by Jesus Christ. Just how I am, warts and all. Even if I hang up washing wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm loved, I'm okay. And because I believe in Jesus Christ, because I believe that He's the only one that can forgive me of my sins, and He's the only one that I can receive salvation through, man, I'm saved. It takes one comment, one little thing on Facebook, on Twitter, Snapchat, to go, oh my goodness. That's just messed up. Like, think about it. I am good enough right now to be loved by the Creator of the universe, and I've got nothing to prove. All I have to do is accept it. But it takes one comment from someone else, and I'm completely flawed, and I start to go, I'm not enough. Like, I don't know about you, but that to me seems really messed up. And my response as a result is also just as messed up. So fortunately, right, we're not the only ones that have thought about this, not the only ones have maybe wrestled with this. So I invite you to just turn up in your Bibles, and I'll look into Exodus chapter 3. Now, Exodus chapter 3, I'm going to be looking at verses 11 to 14. Now, here, backstory is God comes to Moses and says, Moses, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. I want you to take them to the promised land. And Moses goes, nah, I'm not good enough. I am not a good enough speaker. Oh, my words get all mixed up and I'm not confident. And nah, you got the wrong God. And he says, nah, I'm going to be with you. I'll give you a God of help. Nah, it's all good. I'm going to be with you. He goes, nah. And we pick up the story here in Exodus chapter 3, verse 11 and 14. And Moses protests to the Lord and he says, who am I? Like, I'm not good enough. Like, who? Seriously, who am I? Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I? Are you kidding me? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Are you serious? And God answers, I will be with you. This is the sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. He sets a vision for him when you lead. So this is going to happen, and you're going to be here back worshipping me. And so, well, hang on a minute. And Moses protests again in verse 13. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask, yeah, what's his name? Then what shall I tell them? And God replies to Moses, I am who I am. So he did this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And in English, this I am is actually I be. And like, I be everything. I be. So I be covers everything. I be enough. I be all. I be has sent me. I be everything. And I be everything is more than enough. And so when I ask myself and I question myself, am I enough? I can say, well, God's enough. And if God's enough to cover everything, He's enough to cover me. He's enough to cover my inadequacies. So this continues to go on, and we get this message that Jesus continues in the New Testament. And if you just flip on into John, in John chapter 1, we find ourselves into another verse, John chapter 1, verse 14. And it starts out by saying, in the beginning, God was there and the Word was there. And then in verse 14, we start to get into this next passage about, well, what happens with Jesus? And he says this in verse 14. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And so we get this picture of not only is God enough, but he sent his enoughness to be here with us and make his home here. And it's unfailing. It's unfailing. Like, wouldn't it be great to have technology that is unfailing? Right? Like today, we go, hey, no worries, we've got an unfailing system here. No worries, we just turn up and everything will just work. And it's sort of like a domino. One thing falls over and another thing falls over and then something else goes and we can't get the second backup speaker to work and like we're down to one speaker. Maybe that's enough. And maybe that's okay. And maybe our enough today is enough. And maybe our enough tomorrow is actually going to be quite different. And that's okay too. So I want to start getting these feelings. The Bible writers, the people in the Bible have experienced these, and they are giving us a way, clues, to give us a response of what to do with that. And the first response is to go, well, God's enough, and he will be with us. And he's enough. And this other response is, well, if he's in us, then he makes me enough. So when I start to get this feeling of not being enough, I go, well, you know what? I am enough because God's enough and he makes me enough. So I'm covered. The problem is, right, that we don't quite accept it. Even though we got a response here from Jesus throughout the New Testament, and he goes, and we ask, well, who are you? Who are you? And people keep on asking Jesus, who are you? And God says, well, I'm all these things. And Jesus' response is, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. So I will give you sustenance. I will give you everything you need. I will show you where to go, how to go. I am the light. I am the door of the sheep. I am the way to salvation. Through me, you will find safety. I am the resurrection and the life. So I am the creator. I am the one that brings life and takes life away. I'm the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am everything. And he's enough. And the message just keeps coming through to us that he is enough and he is everything. And yet we say, I am not. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable. I'm not able. I'm not tall enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not pretty enough. And we're so quick to believe this reality, but that reality, the scripture, it keeps reminding us time and time again, until we're blue in the face, that this reality that I'm enough is a false reality. It's not true. So what response then do I have? What response then do I have to others? What response would I have to Michelle in that moment? So if I'm going, yeah, okay, well, I am enough because God makes me enough. What's my response? Well, in Acts chapter 6 and 7, we see this story of Stephen. Now, Stephen, man, he's a guy that's been commissioned by his local congregation to be a preacher. And so he's a Jew, and he will go into the synagogue, and he preaches to the Jews. But the Jews don't like that. And so some of the religious leaders start to make up stories about Stephen, their lives. And so they made up a story that, you know what, Stephen is preaching against Moses and God. No way. Oh, he's going to be held accountable to that. So they bring him before the courts, the Sanhedrin. And so there he is. He's being held accountable for crimes that he hasn't committed. And then he has a chance to defend himself. And he launches into this epic tale of how God brought the Jews, Israel, out of Egypt. And then he goes through all the heroes of faith. And all this time, he's reminding the Jews that it was God who was enough to sustain them. It was God's leading and his promise of being with these leaders of faith, these heroes of faith, that they are enough. And it is through God's power that has delivered them. And then he finally nails them, and he nails his own faith because his challenge to them at the end is so strong that they can't deal with it. He says to them, you know what? You have been ignoring the Holy Spirit affecting your life all of this time. And you have persecuted the prophets, and you have persecuted the one, the Messiah. And at that, the KJV puts it this way: they were cut to the heart, and they gnashed on him with their teeth. Now, I've got a visual, right? Well, it's not really quite like cannibalism, okay? So they gnashed on him with their teeth means that as a group, as a collective, as a community, they rose up in anger. So it wasn't just one or two, this was a collective. They rose up in anger, and their action was to stone him to death. Now, the amazing part of this story is what happens next, and that is Stephen, before he takes his last breath, prays this prayer. He says, Lord, do not hold their sin against them. Are you kidding me? Like he's been set up, framed, rejected, accused, sentenced, and then he's been stoned to death. And in his last breath, he pleads for them. He pleads for God not to take revenge on them. Like, how does he get that response? Like, how does he learn to respond in that way? And so there's a clue. If you open up your Bibles to Acts 7:55. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed steadily into heaven. So he was looking up. And he saw Jesus standing in the place of honour at the God's right hand. Verse 56. He told him, look, I see the heavens open up and the Son of Man standing in the place of honour at God's right hand. And he fell to his knees, shouting, Lord, don't charge them with this sin. And with that, he died. God is enough. That makes me enough because He is in me. And His response is so generous because His eyes are focused on God. And when His eyes are focused on God, He's less worried about His own capabilities and what is not. And so for this is my powerful response. My response to not being good enough is to know, hey, you know what? I am good enough because God makes me good enough and He's good enough. And if I'm good enough, then I am generous. I'm generous. And now, how am I going to be generous? So we've got to know this because really, if we don't understand this and if we don't resolve this tension, then we've got an issue. And the issue is that when I ask the question, am I good enough? I'm really saying, yeah, God, are you really good enough to accept me? Because they say that I'm not really that good. And I'm actually questioning God, are you really big enough to handle me and my sin and my weaknesses? That's messed up because when I come to communion and I take the bread, I go, yeah, Lord, you're the one that sustains me, right? You're the one that brings me life. And when I take the wine and I drink that and I go, yeah, Lord, it's you, your blood, your sacrifice. You've got me covered. It was big enough. In fact, it was the only thing that was enough to handle my sin. And I take that. And I love that because that gives me the confidence to know that I am saved. I accept what Jesus did for me and I believe it with all my heart. And that gives me the confidence to know that I'm saved. But yet, when those feelings of I'm not good enough comes up, I go, yeah, I'm not good enough. God, I know this stuff, but I don't believe it. I don't feel it. It's not true. Because they're saying to me, I'm not enough. So how can this be true that you're saying to me that I actually am enough? I don't know. I don't know if I can believe that. Okay. All right, so let me ask you a question. Right, okay, so the question here is kind of like you've got to give me the easiest. You've got to agree with the easiest statement. All right. In fact, hopefully it's the right statement, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you two, right? And then you vote, right? Don't vote first. I'm going to give you two statements and then you get to vote. All right. Which statement is easier? Which is the one that you actually believe to be correct? All right, so it's easier, number one, it's easier to accept God's approval of me. Or two, it's easier to prove my worth to others. One, this is where you get to vote. It's easier to accept God's approval of me. Okay, hands down. It's easier to prove my worth to others. On people online, we've got no hands up here. So we know this to be true, right? Okay, another one. Two statements, which one's easier? It's easy to accept God's opinion of me, one. Or it's easy to accept others' opinion of me. Okay, here we go, you get to vote, right? It's easier to accept God's opinion of me. Or it's easier to accept others' opinion. Okay? So this is where we get confused. So we've got some messages here. Now I want to share with you. I want to share with you today's messages. And I love the worship, Rio and Liqua. Like I got Welly in worship today. So the last time I got Welly wasn't in the movie, it was in worship today. These are the messages. Now this is like a collage, all right? Okay, I delight in showing mercy, and mercy triumphs judgment. You delight in showing mercy, and mercy triumphs over judgment. And we're singing this with all our heart. This is my confidence. And you've never failed me yet. And I believe I'll see you do it again. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Like the messages around us are so powerful that God is enough. He's got me covered. And if He's enough, He's my firm foundation. And I will not be shaken. And so when I get that feeling, when I get that overwhelming question, I'm not enough, I become enough because God is able. He makes me able. And my response is one of love. So, how do we respond? Well, we respond when we can get generous, we can keep being generous when we're focusing on who God is. Who the I am is. And He's saying to us all the time that He's enough. And when I'm focused on God, I'm less worried about what I am not. What my inadequacies actually are. I've got to keep looking up. So, I've got a couple of responses when it comes to Michelle, when it comes to being at the clothesline. The first one is, I go, you know what? I actually don't know everything about hanging up washing. So I don't actually know everything. This actually may not be my spiritual gift. This may not be my natural gifting. And it's okay if I don't know everything about washing. And so it's okay. I can relax and go, Terry, you know what? You don't have to know everything about washing. It's okay. And I can go, I don't have to be right. Because I don't have to know everything. And I can relax and I can be generous to myself. And I can say, I don't need to know everything. In fact, I don't really want to know everything, and I don't want to be right about everything. So first of all, I can be really generous to myself and say, hey, that's okay. I might have got that wrong, and that's okay. I don't need to know everything. And my second response, a response of generosity, is a response of generosity to others. And I can go, hey, well, you know more about this, so show me how to do it. Let me get it right. Let me do it better. A response of being kind to myself, being generous to myself, and then have this sense of being generous to others. So with these messages, when I get this feeling, I'm not enough, I go, you know what, I am enough because God makes me enough, and that makes me generous. And I can be generous. I can be generous to myself, and I can be generous with others. So the reality is that Jesus' death is everything. It covers all of our failures. God is enough. And he makes me enough because I am is in me. I am capable because God is capable. And imagine what would happen if our community, if our church right now, if all of us were able to model this sort of acceptance of God's love, acceptance of who we are. Imagine the joy that would come through the generous acceptance of others right now, here, amongst their family and friends and in our community. This generous acceptance of, God is enough. I am enough. You are enough. We are enough. This community, this church is enough. And God is here with us. And he makes us enough. He makes us capable. He makes us generous. And so when I now wonder about what I'm supposed to do, what is my response to being not enough, I go, I am enough because God makes me enough. And my response is, I'm going to be generous. I'm generous to myself, and I'm going to be generous with others. Thanks for listening.